What is racism? According to the Oxford Dictionary, racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on their belief that one's own race is superior. This issue is important to me because I see it in everyday life. It violates human rights. There is very little being done to prevent and stop it. This topic is both personal to me, being an Aboriginal person, because I have felt these pains of racism before. Racism is present for Indigenous peoples locally, nationally, and globally. In Thunder Bay, there is racism around every corner. Whether it's at school, graffiti, violence, or around the community, it is present everywhere. In Thunder Bay, there have been many incidents of racial slurs being spray painted all over town. Sandra Albertson's garage door was vandalized the morning of June 8, 2013. She believes that education is the key to solving racism. Albertson said, "I think they need the opportunity to live and learn and walk in the shoes of another person and understand about their culture, about their background." As well as graffiti, there's also a fair amount of racial violence in Thunder Bay. Recently, Aboriginal women have been living in fear of racial violence. A 36-year-old woman had been strangled, beaten, and raped in a wooded area. The attacker said they have done this before, according to Teresa Trudeau. Aboriginal women of the community claim that Thunder Bay police are a part of the problem. They also accuse them of abuse and racial profiling, but Chief J.P. Levesque disagrees with that statement. Trudeau said, "Not with my life will I trust a police officer in this city." According to the police use of force report, out of 29 Aboriginals, only 3.4% of officers are actually charged with murder, but for the other 98%, they are dismissed. Meanwhile, out of 222 white people, 6.8 of officers are charged. Studies show that murders of Aboriginals are more likely to be dismissed than a murder of a white person. Racism has been a part of Canada's past, present, and hopefully not the future. During the 19th century, the Canadian government thought that an aggressive assimilation was needed for Aboriginal peoples. Residential schools were built all over Canada to teach Aboriginal kids the European culture, religion, and lifestyle. Aboriginal students were abused sexually, physically, and emotionally. An apology was formally made to all Aboriginal peoples and their families. Compensation for victims was given out, but that does not change the past. In Canadian politics, there are not many Aboriginal representatives. In the House of Commons, there are 5 Aboriginal MPs and 303 non-Aboriginal MPs. Since 1888, only 15 Aboriginal people have sat in the Senate. In the House of Commons, the Standing Committee of Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development, there are only 2 out of 12 members that are actually Aboriginal. There is a very unequal representation of Aboriginal peoples in Canada, the Canadian Parliament. Canada's Parliament will hopefully continue to move forward. Indigenous peoples around the world have witnessed racism at some point of time. In 1933, it was the start of the mass murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazis. The Germans believed they were racially superior. There are also many stereotypes. During the 19th century, Irish people were stereotyped as unemployed drunks. They were also called white Negroes. Mexicans are often seen as aliens because from the 1940s and on, there have been many illegal immigrants. So now they are all seen as illegal. Many Middle Eastern Indigenous peoples experience racism when traveling or when seen. They are seen as terrorists. In USA, a Gallup poll stated that 43% of Americans feel prejudice to Muslims even if they don't know them. Chinese and Japanese are often stereotyped as brainiacs or nerds. African Americans suffered racism for a long time. They had no rights. It slowly progressed, and then came Martin Luther King Jr., who put a stop to racism against African Americans. It was a mass protest to fight for their racist rights. There were sit-ins and boycotts all over the states. Racism is apparent in every culture, in every town, and in every country. Stereotypes are one of the biggest forms of racism. But they are not alone. Racism happens, but it is the future generations that have the most potential to change it. As a person, you need to be above racism and stay strong. As a community, you need to make a change. Help others, educate others. Take matters into your own hands. To all the non-Aboriginals, educate yourself. Take the time to learn about another culture or other than your own. Racism hurts people, communities, and majorities of population. Aboriginals are just the same as you. In order to stop racism, we need to educate people. Stopping ignorance will help stop racism. Stopping racism won't happen overnight, but for racism to stop, we need to respect each other. Overall,